Hi, welcome to the UK Unlock 21 Dialogue series, hosted by LawWiser, powered by Indus Law in association with UK IBC. This is a three-part video series to discuss the various complexities and opportunities for UK-India trade and investment bilateral relationship, viewed from the lens of Brexit. With the end of post-Brexit transition approaching fast, which is December 31st, 2020, this topic is garnering a lot of interest. We all know India and UK share a strong relationship and has always worked further to explore and deepen this trade and investment relationship. To bolster this, India is also hosting the UK Foreign Secretary and will also be hosting the UK Prime Minister, Mr. Boris Johnson, for the upcoming Republic Day, which is on January 26, 2021, as a chief guest. Our first session today focuses on the post-Brexit UK-India investment relationship. We will be discussing the key priority sectors such as the FMCG, IT data, and life sciences, which have been identified by both the countries, which are priority sectors when it comes to investment and trade. We will be exploring the regulatory and compliance challenges in these priority sectors, along with what would be the post-Brexit opportunities in these sectors. To discuss this and more, we have experts with us. We have Ms. Saloni Tuteja. She's the Director, Legal South Asia of Simmer Biomet. We have Mr. Jayant Krishna. He's the Group CEO of UK IBC. And we have Mr. Gaurav Dani, Partner in Indus Law. So starting our discussion, I would first like to ask Jayant, we all know UK IBC has recently launched the report on UK-India investment and ease of doing business. So how do you see the collaboration and investment panning out in these priority sectors post-Brexit? And what are the challenges that are likely to be there for them? At the same time, how do you see these challenges being minimized?
Sania, first of all, let's understand that, the two countries have had a shared history, shared culture. We are, two of the largest democracies in the world. If you look at, there's already a critical mass in our economic relationship. If you look at the trade between the two countries, last year, the trade between UK and India was of an order of 24 billion pounds. And last year it grew by 10%. Despite the fact that there was some slowdown in the economies, but the trade between the two countries still grew. If you look at the investments, I'm talking about the Indian investments in UK and UK investments in India. See, for example, Indian investments in UK, if you look at, India is the second largest investor in UK, kind of a thing, next only to the US. So, and with a lot of, big brands like Tata's, like ONGC, TVS, SR, whole lot of Mahindras, they have a very, very significant business footprint in the UK. If you look at, the British companies in India, then you have Kent, you have Vedanta, HSBC, Vodafone, JCB, for whom, India is one of the largest manufacturing bases, the world over. You have British Petroleum, Diageo, Glaxo, Rolls-Royce, and then the list is long. And UK has been the second largest growing among the G10 countries, among the investors in India. So I think there is already a critical mass. And, as far as the trade is concerned, both the Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson and Narendra Modi, they have reported to, have said that, they should be moving towards a free trade agreement, and FTA discussions take time. It is an iterative process. And therefore, in the last JETCO meeting, which was held, it was clearly agreed, that the two countries will go for an enhanced trade partnership, and there have been from the last JETCO onwards, there have been more meetings between Minister Piyush Goyal and Elizabeth Truss, and all of them are intended at removing the non-trade barriers and and whole lot of improvements. And also, there have been three major focus areas. One is food and drinks. which is a part of FMCG, as you had mentioned earlier. Then you have data, digital and data services, more in the ICT space. Then the third area is, pharmaceuticals and healthcare. So these special working groups were constituted, and, their reports were submitted to the UK government, and it has talked about, what are the key asks from that UK has from India, and India has from UK for these sectors to reach, to go to the next level of maturity. So I see a lot of, and you mentioned about Brexit, Sania. Let me tell you that UK India Business Council recently did a survey of more than 100 large and SME, a very, very detailed survey of UK companies, which have invested in India. And you'll be surprised, out of all the companies, 31% of them said that post-Brexit, they will do more business with India. 31%, and 69% said that, the Brexit does not impact their business relationship with India at all, And not a single company said that because of Brexit, their business relationship with India would dwindle, So I think with Brexit happening, there is more opportunity for trade, for investments between the two countries, and possibly also for more manpower, to meet the talent deficit and other business requirements of UK. So I think I see tremendous opportunities all along. In the same survey, if I have to report a few more things, it identified the challenges also. What are the major reforms asked for, UK companies who have investments in India, and so on and so forth. They talked about, the bureaucratic processes in India need to improve. More accountability has to be there, in the government machinery. And also, how do we increase the regulatory certainty? That's another very important factor that came into came on the front, and the UK companies asked from India also includes one more thing. More than the GST rates, they have said the processes need much more simplification and stability, kind of a thing. Of course, then the usual things, how do we make the quality of infrastructure better, and how do we make the single window clearance, more effective, give more teeth to the single windows which operate, so that they take decisions for sanctions and approvals on behalf of various this thing, and if you look at even if I just shift the discussion to the Atmanirbhar Bharat, initially there were some apprehensions, whether this will be a roadblock or it will isolate the Indian economy. But over a period of time, the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, the Trade and Commerce, the Industry and Commerce Minister, they have very clearly mentioned that if at all Atmanirbhar Bharat means a greater integration of Indian economy with the global economy, and you have in the COVID days, you see how the Oxford vaccine is getting manufactured by Serum Institute of India with arrangements with AstraZeneca. And and there's so many co-creation opportunities. Rolls-Royce is planning an aircraft engines co-creation in India for manufacture in India. De La Rue is talking about some very, very security-enabled currency technology to flow to India for manufacturing in India. So I think we are talking about, when you look at the UK-India relationship, the UK technology, because that's the area of strength. How does it get transferred? And some co-creation of technology happens in India for manufacturing in India. So there are a whole lot of opportunities going forward, and but progressively we have to ensure that the ease of doing business of India as a country, as we know, in last 4 years it has improved from about 140th something to 63rd, and the government's intent is to improve it. Gradually bring it, bring India to among the top 25 countries in terms of ease of doing business ranking. So I think these are all very, very positive signals. And now with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's visit on our Republic Day as the chief guest at the parade, and the bilateral talks would again herald a new phase of growth. There's a lot of mutuality in the relationship. And whole lot of positives then that one can if you look at India and UK, do not operate as such with the sense of competition. There's more of collaboration, they complement each other very, very substantially. I mean, just to give you some data points, if you look at import export, very often, this becomes during negotiations a point of, a very contentious issue. But if you look at bulk of the Indian exports to UK, what they are comprising of, they comprise of consumer goods and of course the IT and IT enabled services. If you look at almost 80% of the Indian imports from UK, those are raw material and capital goods which are used for manufacturing in India and then for domestic consumption and for export to UK and other countries and all that. So I think there's a lot of mutuality in the relationship, and I see a lot of positivity and a lot of both at the Prime Minister level, at the other ministerial levels, a whole lot of, and now with the Foreign Secretary's visit and his meetings with the Indian Foreign Minister yesterday, I'm sure this is a good preamble, to take the relationship to the next position of strength and maturity. So, let me try to articulate, the ask from a few from India, few from UK. I mean, if you look at the visa regime, that's one challenge, which has been largely addressed, but still a few things remain. India is perhaps the biggest beneficiary of visas in UK. If you look at the tier 2 skilled worker category, 50% of all visas in 2019 went to Indians, and totaling to about 57,000. If you look at tier 4, which is the student visa, there 37,500 visas were given in 2019, which showed a 93% increase in 1 year itself, because UK allowed these students to work there for 2 more years after completing their degrees. So I think, but one key ask which from India, which is still there, is that India perhaps needs to be added in the category of low risk countries, so that the amount of due diligence that happens before grant of visa is minimized, because Indians by and large are very, very law abiding and conforming citizens, and a few asks on the point based system, which is good, but but how do we align it with the special occupation classification codes, broaden the apprenticeship levy into skills training levy, and so these kind of things are still there. Revise the minimum wages. But let me come to the other sectoral focus that you asked for. What are the barriers there? Look at the IT, information and communication technologies itself. Perhaps there's a need for a UK-India data adequacy agreement. That's one thing which has been hanging, which needs to be looked into, and also the personal data protection bill, and also the non-personal data. So there are a lot of clarifications, a lot of doubts which exist. I think they need to be addressed. If you look at the life sciences area, then a lot of British companies that they say that India has for many categories their own standards, and very often India does not follow the international standards, which are the de facto international standards. So it really creates another layer of unnecessary conformance and things like that. So India has to do a far better job of collaboration on alignment of standards with the global standards.
Thank you, Jayam. This was very helpful, giving us a background and also, these insights on these various priority sectors. Yeah, moving on further, Gaurav, if you can share, what do you think are the regulatory challenges, especially in these cross-border transactions with these prominent sectors, for investment, especially for UK companies which are trying to enter into India or doing business in India?
So just on the India-UK side, I'm quite heavily invested personally, because I studied my law in the UK, and 2 decades back when I was going to study, so we were told that there's a lot of scope for professional in the India-UK corridor. So it's good if you study law in the UK. So I'm quite personally heavily invested, into the sector. So specifically, talking about the regulatory framework, and obviously when I started practicing law 2 decades ago, we've seen India move from a closed economy to one of the leading economies in the world, where there's this generational shift in terms of policy and regulations welcoming foreign investment. So when late and early 90s, a lot of companies were not allowed to invest in India unless there was a government approval. So that changed and that gradually kept changing from a time when it was heavily restricted to now where, barring a few sensitive sectors like nuclear energy, defense, aviation, insurance, where a foreign company can invest in pretty much any sector under the automatic rule with no approvals required. So that's pretty much the policy framework with respect to investing into India. Similarly, Indian companies were not allowed to go out, take cash out, for investments. So currently, where we are sitting is that, barring very very few sectors like financial services and real estate, even an Indian company can actually go acquire anything in the UK. So that's where we are now. Having said that, what has changed in the last year post the pandemic is that there's a huge anti-China sentiment. So barring that restriction from China, and that has its own political reasons. I mean, it started off with a pandemic, but later on became political. Barring that, there is no restriction from a geography perspective. But yes, if a UK company is looking to invest in India, they need to ensure that the beneficial ownership of those shares is eventually not sitting with somebody in China, because that's going to create hurdles. So that's on the policy front. Now, apart from the policy, when we advise foreign companies coming into India, they always look at a level playing field. Now, they look at a level playing field from the consumer laws, the company's law, the dispute resolution process, and a whole bunch of other things. So, I mean, from my experience, again, it's a generational shift. Last decade has been significant in India. We've had, a huge overhaul of a lot of legislation which affect, any foreign company who's investing in India. As Jayan mentioned that, we moved from a very high rating to a difficult country to do business. On the ease of business, ranking we moved up quite significantly. And one reason for that is also, the legal landscape has changed quite significantly. Talk specifically of some changes. Of course, we had the New Companies Act, in 2030, I think. So that act, overhauled the previous 1950 legislation, brought the Company Acts more in line with the global, sophisticated corporate laws. So that was a significant change. After that, what was felt was that the Consumer Act was quite archaic. It is the era of tech-driven consumerism. Social media is bigger than print media. So we had a law which was passed last year, which was codified earlier this year, the new Consumer Protection Act. That act, is pretty much in line with any other foreign consumer legislation in terms of, covering digital media, technology services. So that, in my opinion, gives good level playing field to a multinational company, especially from the UK investing in India. The other significant piece of legislation was the competition law. Of course, when you have companies, you'll have combinations, you'll have mergers, you'll have acquisitions. So there needs to be a regime sophisticated enough to ensure that eventually the regulator is looking at large combinations. So similarly to how it is there in the US and other sophisticated countries, we have a pretty mature competition law, which is again something very recent. Third thing which any investor look at in India is a relatively smooth dispute resolution process in the unlikely event that the contracts they enter into run into disputes. So there also, the Indian courts have been actually quite, inefficient generally in terms of the speed at which they resolve disputes. But we've had an overhaul of the arbitration law, which again has a time-bound process for resolution of disputes. From a transactional perspective, international contracts will have Singapore jurisdiction for resolution. So over the years, that has also gained a lot of acceptability. if in the situation where you end up in a dispute, it is easy to, to resolve. The courts to understand that process quite well. Uh, that's been, I think, the significant changes from a legal perspective. Uh, you know, why a Google chooses to invest and a Facebook chooses to invest such a heavy amount of money in a country like in a company like Reliance is because they feel that yes, India is ready, for such large investments. So that's the generational shift I've seen. And as I said, when I started practicing law, it was very restrictive. So in just about 20 years, we've come a long way.
So, Gaurav, there's been a lot of significant changes that has happened. Do you think anything specific that UK companies will be looking up to for, India? Something that's like a concern for UK companies specifically? Or you think all of this actually is primarily a concern and would eventually be, part of the ease of doing business
I mean,
policy?
the rules of the game are the same, whether it's from Japan or UK or the US. Eventually, they want the ease of the money coming in. They
True.
want flexibility in terms of operations, and they
Yeah.
want the ease of an exit. Now, the ease of an exit, was somewhere, covered by the Vodafone case. So that was something which created uncertainty for some time. But thankfully, we have a favorable judgment in favor of Vodafone. Of course, that case, other than legal, has complex issues of sovereignty and things like that. But again, I don't see that as an impediment because you will eventually have a case like Vodafone one-off in evolving economies. The government is also not used to such exits, such amount of tax not being paid. So I think there also, once the courts have gone through the process, the legislators have looked at it. The future, such cases will not arise. I would like to see two further changes. Again, in terms of what I call the level playing field. One is that our labor laws are quite archaic. We have some 44, 45 legislations which cover the entire gamut of labor laws. Now that's very complex. It's very difficult to navigate. A lot of times, a lot of combinations don't take place because there are labor issues involved, especially for the manufacturing companies. So what is happening now is there is an attempt to sort of recodify their entire laws into four different codes, so covering industrial relations, safety of workers, wage and things like that. So I think that's also in the pipeline. Hopefully we will see that will see the light of the day very soon. In fact, we've already got companies asking us to study that code and see how that impacts their businesses. So that is one change, which will happen soon. The other change I would like to see is a data protection law. That's hugely relevant, for all businesses now, given the world we live in. So currently, it is not codified. It is sitting in different legislations. So in fact, we've had a data protection bill, which was published, I think, about a year and a half ago. So that is still in the pipeline, but hopefully that should also see the light of the day. So that bill, it's modeled on the EU data protection law. Again, it's quite sophisticated. Offers a good atmosphere and an environment for companies to doing business in India.
As we all know now, what are the, broadly the regulatory challenges that exist? Saloni, if you could highlight, as Gaurav had mentioned on the FDI aspect, we all are aware that there's 100% FDI now on medical devices. So what would your advice be to, UK life sciences company who are thinking to invest in India and vice versa, especially in the life sciences sector, which, has been a major concern this year post-pandemic? And, how do you see what would be the compliance issues either now or post-Brexit that you see them rising up?
I think Gaurav and Jayant has already covered a lot of on this. I'll just take threads from their conversation and take it forward. One thing which I think Gaurav very beautifully captured is the overhaul of the law, which I believe has also helped build the image of our country. I think that's where we had been struggling. The perception was not so positive in I believe 10 years back. which has significantly increased over or improved over 10 years. And I can give you an example of anti-corruption. I think UK Bribery Act, which is one of the strictest extrajudicial act, or any American company would look into FCPA. These are very tough anti-corruption laws, and many companies, whether it was UK, US, and other jurisdictions, they feared investing in India. So I think this is just one slice of it, but I believe that image rectification and improvement of our law, which many of which has been already covered by Gaurav, but decriminalization of laws is again another thing which I think has been a positive attraction towards companies to invest. And I remember before I joined Zimmer Bramett, I was in a law firm. The first question that I used to get is, will the director, foreign director, be behind the prison? Because there were so many laws, which, and especially labor laws, which had criminal, impact. So right now, I can say, at least for life sciences, there has been a lot of movement, advocacy on decriminalization. So that's something which is improving and attracting, in addition to other parameters like opening up out of our economy even further, and the changing times. Another benefit that I see is also IP protection. I think our courts have been very protective about the IP rights, which was again not so stringent 10 years back. And 10 years is just a time frame. It can be 12, it can be 15, but it's a way to say that we have improved a lot, because these are the fears that we see. I think it's not only about ease of investment, it is also, as Gaurav mentioned and as Jayant also reiterated, it is also about continuing the business and exiting the business. So those are the things that that we have been working towards, whether it is a public powered private partnership. Again, in 2016, we saw a big project that was launched between Indian government and the UK government on healthcare. It was called, one of the projects called IUIH, where NHA had a very big investment. Similarly, was the Kellogg, another King's College was a part of the investment of this entire, this entire project. So we see not only the governments being involved, but also government entities being involved, and private entities participating in that. So I think that's a good collaboration, and especially that is required in sensitive industries like life sciences. And you also mentioned it, that this past 1 year has actually taught us the importance of healthcare and being healthy.
Absolutely.
So that's another aspect that I thought I'll highlight. And another thing which I believe, again, Jayant had mentioned, since 2016, or predecessor of the current Prime Minister, since May's conversation with Narendra Modi to now, I see there has been a lot of improvement. Our investment perspective, our ease of doing business perspective. Last year, I was involved in some incorporation of a company which was 100% FDI, and it actually took few days to get the company incorporated. So those things I think gives a lot of comfort. And also I've seen that there is a lot of online online interaction rather than the so-called touts. We don't need them anymore. I think earlier that was another hitch which was there with a lot of companies. Again, these examples I'm giving, it is both applicable to UK and many such countries. So those are the things. And of course, insurance has seen a lot of FDI. Then medical devices, you've already mentioned. Hospitals, I was reading up, there is a I think UK finance entity that invested in an Indian hospital. This was just one of the examples. And again, hospitals have been collaborating together or integrating rather than having one or two nursing homes here and there. So there has been a lot of change in that sector. Corporate setup of hospitals is also giving a lot of comfort to to different companies to invest, whether it's through financial institutions or acquisition by a UK company. So I think these practical changes and improvement in the image is what has been encouraging to everyone. Hope it continues like that.
If you all can throw some light towards how post-Brexit would be a unique opportunity for UK India to be, working on the market innovation and investment in these key sectors.
Currently the stage is quite nicely set for a favorable FTA, which is being negotiated. There has been some announcement today on timelines as to when that see the light. So that FTA, of course, will give some benefit to certain industries. So that we'll see where that is heading. Other than that, I see great opportunity, for technology companies to collaborate with UK. Because outside the Silicon Valley, India has emerged as a large technology hub. We've had several startup companies, who got incubated in India. In fact, we were fortunate enough to represent a few, and they've gone outside India. The Olas, the OYOs, who are innovative business models. So in technology, I see huge opportunities in education tech, insurance tech, health tech. So these are the sectors where we will see a lot more action in the coming years. So it from opportunity perspective, it looks very exciting, and let's see a lot more investments, both sides, from India to the UK and vice versa.
So the way I see the entire relationship between UK and India is that we've come a long way, but we have a very long way to go. There is always an area of improvement. There has been a significant improvement, like I mentioned, in our image, which gives confidence to our investors. But having said that, that's not start all, end all. We have, as a country, as a nation, we've also put together on overhauling the laws. Many of them have been beautifully captured by Gaurav and some of the asks which Jayant has mentioned. So yes, we are working not on a lopsided manner, because that may attract investment, but that will not retain investment in the country for a long run. So I think that's what is our objective as a company, or or asks from the government. And I believe government is open to such suggestions, and has in the past also been taken that into consideration while floating their policies. So that's what I believe, and I continue to believe that will happen.
And very few countries have actually used pandemic as an opportunity to reform, which India has done big time in terms of MSME sector reforms, some of those the credit related reforms, recent agro reforms. So I think these kind of things would make India more manufacturing, a very, very natural destination for greater manufacturing, so that a greater component of our GDP comes from manufacturing sector. So I think this is a very, very good signal. I think India needs to work at improving the ease of doing business even more. UK, India, post-Brexit, there's a lot of visa issues. Some of them have been eased in the last few years, but I think there is a long way to go. More free movement of people between the two countries. I think that will do wonders. And progressively, both non-tariff issues as well as tariff barriers need to get removed. And as the two nations embrace the enhanced trade partnership and relentlessly, keep working towards a free trade agreement, I'm sure these two countries are destined to have, to attain yet loftier heights when it comes to, the economic corridor.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for taking time out and sharing these insights on UK-India trade relationship, and especially these priority sectors, which are rising and a major concern for many businesses, both in India and UK. Thank you.